to everyone who has taken time from their evening to join us tonight for the MSU Surplus Store Recycling Town Hall. We are very excited tonight to be talking about the state of recycling in Michigan. We're joined with Matt Flector from the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. He's the Recycling Market Development Specialist there, and Chris Jolly, who is the manager at the MSU Surplus Store and Recycling Center. Tonight, we will be discussing where we are currently with recycling and resource recovery in Michigan and where we hope to go. So we will hear from Matt and Chris while they have a conversation about this topic, and then we'll open up for a public Q&A session at the end of the conversation. So feel free to please submit your questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and then we will relay those. The same goes for if you're watching on Facebook. You are welcome to drop your questions in the comments section and we will take care of those. So many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the recycling raccoons, and you might not realize that that's a campaign of EGLE. So they are part of the Know It Before You Throw It campaign, and that was awarded the best campaign of the year by Waste Dive, the industry magazine and newspaper. I can refresh your memory on who the raccoons are. Those little friends up there, they've been on the billboards, keeping us in check with what to do to recycle right. And we will learn more about that tonight. In his role as the Recycling Market Development Specialist, Matt works to ensure there are markets for all of our commodities that we drop into the bin at the curb. And he's been in this field for over 20 years. The same goes for Chris Jolly. Both of them are alums of MSU. Chris studied public policy, and Matt is a graduate of Lyman Briggs College. And when Chris was attending MSU, he was the first student to be hired by our recycling program. He's seen a lot of changes, and since then he's played the role of recycling coordinator, focused on education, and also the manager for the surplus store. We're excited to have you both here today, and I will pass it to you, Chris.
Great, thanks. I'm really excited. If you want to hear from somebody who knows something about recycling in Michigan, Matt would probably be the person who knows the most ins and outs from the entire state of what everybody's doing. The most knowledge. I've worked with Matt for a long time. He's a person who actually lives the values as well. I recall my first time in a Michigan Recycling Coalition Board of Directors meeting. Matt pulls out his packed in lunch with his cloth napkin from home and takes all of his waste home with him. And I remember being impressed from that first day I met Matt. For 20 years, Matt has worked to transform materials, once thought of waste into jobs, energy, savings, and improved quality of life. As the Recycling Market Development Specialist with EGLE, Matt assists recycling programs by growing the Michigan supply chain so the valuable commodities that businesses need make their way from the curb to new products. He is a longtime member of the Michigan Recycling Coalition Board of Directors and former chair of the Mid-America Council of Recycling Officials. He completed the Great Lakes Leadership Academy Advanced Leader Program in 2017. And Matt has always viewed recycling as a gateway to environmental, economic, social sustainability, where individuals can see the positive impact of their daily decisions. And he is always surprised by the number of other Peace Corps volunteers in the recycling world. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. Welcome. Hopefully I've got some bandwidth issues. I keep getting that coming up. I don't know how bad it is right now, but we're going to get it fixed as we're going along. Can you give me a audio check just to make sure it's doing okay?
Yeah, you're looking good.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, that was a great introduction. I'm really glad to be here too. Right, we've worked on this issue for a long time, and it seems to get more and more complex the more we get into it, and that's something that I like about it. As we uncover and solve problems and find solutions, we uncover and have the opportunity to solve new ones. So yeah, it's really good to be here tonight. And thanks for setting this up too, Katie. Thanks for your leadership and getting this organized and leading us through this. So appreciate the whole team.
Cool. So we hope one of the goals Matt and I have for tonight is I want to kind of give you an idea where we're at recycling wise in the state today and where we're trying to go and how EGLE's leading the way in that direction. One of the other things I failed to mention about Matt is, as long as I've known him, he's been incredibly optimistic and goal oriented for where he wants Michigan to go. That optimism hasn't changed, and I think it's stronger now than it's ever been. So I'm pretty excited to talk tonight. So Matt, can you talk about what EGLE's role is in facilitating and promoting recycling statewide for residents, businesses, and industry?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, we've got quite a few years behind us now, and it's been a long, bumpy road to get to this point. But there's been so many people that have been involved to help get us to where we are today. When I started about 20 years ago, Michigan was once thought of as a recycling leader. We had one of the first deposit laws in the country. We had some of the first curbside recycling programs in the world. And then we kind of lost our game. We weren't doing, other states were passing us by. And I came in looking at all the new opportunities, whether it's on composting or recycling, and whether it's curbside or industrial. And when we started, we were like, oh my gosh, there's so many different problems to solve. That's when we put together a really clear and detailed plan that focuses on education, making sure that people know how, where, and why to recycle, focusing on quality, making sure that material is of quality that somebody can use it. We focused on infrastructure, making sure all of you have a place like the drop-off at the surplus center to go to take your recyclables, or curbside recycling, making sure that there's places for the organics to go. And through that, as we move through that supply where the material goes from your curb into something new, think about, what are the markets? Where can that material be turned into something new? So you can go to the store and you can buy it, all the while thinking about the entire waste hierarchy, not just about recycling, but how we can reduce the amount of material we're using, how we can reuse it, and of course, recycle it or use it for its highest and best use. And through all of that, in this plan of education, infrastructure, markets, we need strong policies. And those policies need collaboration. They need industry, they need residents, they need communities and local governments, all to recognize that we have a shared responsibility in making sure we manage our trash differently than we're doing today. So that's what we do at EGLE.
You gave me a lot to unpack there. What is our recycling rate in Michigan? How do we compare to our neighbors?
Yeah, so we are going in the right direction. Part of the reason we know that we're going in the right direction is because we have a measurement system in place. We were at about 15% a couple of years ago when we started this initiative, and now we're up to 18%. Now, how does that compare to other states? It's not very good. We've got a lot of work still to do. But I can say that we're heading in the right direction. If we look across our Midwest states, Minnesota is our leader. We're above 45, 50%. Indiana is probably either right on our tails or maybe about up to where we are right now. And then the rest of the states are somewhere in between.
Great. So I asked you in an earlier call about the bottle bill on that. So when we look at the state of Michigan and we're that low, I'm shocked that number includes what we collect from our redemption program. Do you have any more information on that? Or I mean, it's stunning.
For sure.
Don't we have one of the most successful programs in the country for redemption?
We do. We have one of the highest return rates of any deposit law in the world. One of the reasons for that is it's a 10-cent deposit where the rest of them are 5. Now that's going down. Our redemption rate is going down because that value of the 10 cents isn't what it used to be, right? Also, we're doing a good job at expanding our curbside and drop-off recycling programs, and people are dropping those dimes in their curbside bin. But still, we dipped into in the high 80% rate. So we're around 90%, which is one of still the highest in the country. And it's important to note, even though we have the best deposit law in the world, I'll call it, why not? It's only about 2% of our waste stream. But because our recycling rate isn't really where it could be or should be or will be after we're done doing all the work that we're doing, it's about 15% of the material that gets recycled in Michigan is from the deposit law. So it is intuitive to think that's a pretty big amount because it's so visible. But at the end of the day, it's about 15% of the amount that we recycle.
Wow. Okay. So kind of in that vein, you know, we got here and we have, you know, in my neighborhood in the past 3 years, we've gotten curbside recycling finally. We've noticed at our center that our drop-off utilization rate before COVID was already dropping because of the advent of curbside programs. So you can see how Michigan is changing and growing. What's your vision for the next couple of years? How are we going to change and continue to grow and hit some of those areas where curbside isn't the most convenient currently?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of the work that we're doing right now is on, as I mentioned, policy. And today, just today, the Part 115, that's our solid waste regulations. That's what we in the industry call that's the nickname we have for it, Part 115, but it's our solid waste laws are being amended. And they just came out of committee today. So it's kind of a big day for a lot of people in our industry that we find this is the farthest we've gotten on these. And what those laws do is they change the way we look at waste from, well, it's no longer a waste, it's a resource. But our solid waste laws they were designed to make sure that we have a place for our trash to go. And we have landfills, and we did a darn good job of that. One of the reasons we have the cheapest landfill rates in the country is because the people before us, probably some of the people that hired Chris, were sitting in a room and said, we need to do better and make sure we have a place to put our trash. So we have a lot of landfills. Price goes down, makes it hard to recycle. So what those 115 laws are, as we call them, those are going to look at waste differently. It's a resource. We're going to set benchmark recycling standards. And we are going to make sure that there's a level playing field between waste and recycling. But that's only one component of what we're going to do. You asked, what are we working on? And one of the things that I think is most interesting is the way that we view trash is maybe in the 70s and 80s and part of the 90s, recycling was really thought of as an environmental issue. Let's do right by the earth. But now that we're working with policymakers on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, they know that it's not only an environmental issue, but it's an economic issue. It creates jobs. Think about it. Think about all of the materials. Look around you right now, wherever you are. Look at that chair that's sitting next to your shoes, or the paper in front of you, if you have that. All of that material at some point is going to be trash. Some point you're going to not want it anymore. So, but where would it go? If we put it in a hole in the ground, we might create one job with that. But if we put it back into the system, into the circular economy, we can create 6 jobs. So why not? Or more, really, depending on the material. So where we're going with that is we're telling that story. We're working on policy. We're talking about it as an economic issue. And we're building a coalition of people that want to manage their trash differently than we do today.
The legislation we're talking about, and especially we're talking about jobs and job creation, it's been a bipartisan effort as well, right? It's not just one party, or it actually did it start under Snyder's administration?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I would say that the earliest work was really done in the previous administration before that. And I would say the body of these solid waste amendments, the most where they came from really was a collaborative effort with all like 70 different industry groups, all getting together and saying, how are we going to do this differently? And so there's been a ton of compromise, and ultimately doesn't do everything we might want, but it definitely gets us down the road and moves us in the right direction. And that's the nature of policymaking, right? Any of you that have been involved in that, you need both sides of the aisle in Michigan to have success.
So I know there's a couple different things with even some legislation that's already been passed to provide funding to help grow recycling in Michigan. Can you talk a little bit about what's already been passed and where we're already going with funding?
Yeah, for sure. Um, so about maybe it was about 10 years ago, we were working on our updated solid waste policy, which was really just setting the direction of which direction the state should go on education, on infrastructure, on markets, on policy, that plan I was talking about. And we had three
Oh, you locked up.
separate attempts to expand that solid waste surcharge to get our solid. Oh, I did. Am I frozen again? So hopefully, am I doing okay?
You're okay.
Am I frozen?
Your voice track isn't going with your mouth, but we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know I haven't had any internet issues today.
Looks
So
good now.
it's not bad if it goes bad again. So we had worked at 3 separate times to get this always surcharge increased to create a stable funding mechanism for recycling. And I walked into a colleague's office and I said, I'm tired of this. We have to get a funding mechanism. We have to do it because other states are leaving us behind. So we set a 3-year goal to get a solid waste funding mechanism in place, some way to get recycling dollars back to communities and businesses. And about 7 years later of that 3-year plan, we were successful working with the Michigan Recycling Coalition and Karen O'Brien to work the policy side to successfully achieve the Renew Michigan Fund, which is about $15 million annually, specifically for recycling activities in Michigan. And it's really nice to talk to my colleagues in other states and have them express a bit of jealousy that we've successfully achieved a funding mechanism to support our local recycling programs. And we're really well on our way to returning Michigan to a leadership position because of that funding, and because not only it's not, and so I want to be real clear, that funding is only one part of the work that we're doing, because we're taking that funding and we're leveraging it to turn it into something more, that shared responsibility I was talking about before. And we're doing that through Next Cycle. And we can talk a little bit about that later, but it's really a recognition that this work can't be done on the backs of government or local government or universities. It's everybody that needs to be involved to get our recycling system working better.
Yeah, well, we're here. Let's talk a little bit about Next Cycle, because I'm curious. Last year, we received an infrastructure grant from EGLE for a robotic sorting unit for our material recovery facility, which would have been awesome to have before COVID started, because we don't really have people working on our sort line. We could have used the robotic sorting, but it's ordered and on its way. I'm pretty excited about that. So how is the new funding different than the infrastructure grants we got before? And
Yeah, for sure.
I'm pretty excited about the different tracks and seems much more expansive.
Yeah, for sure. Let me talk about that and the recycling grants just for a second before I jump over to what's next. Boy, when we went through COVID last year, or we're still going through it, but when it really shut everything down and there was all this conversation about what should be open, what shouldn't be open, or how we were going to safely operate, I'll tell you, we used that example of having robotics and modernizing our recycling system as a way to demonstrate that these investments in recycling are about the health, safety, and welfare of Michigan residents and your workers. So having those options and using technology to manage our materials differently, to process them, sort them, get them into new markets, and really, that's one of the biggest game changers. Is we've got so much new innovation that's coming into the marketplace right now. And your grant was a great example that we could use to say, hey, we got to get this money out the door. They need it now. So thank you for the work that you're doing on that front. So now what's next as I mentioned, the funding, we can't do this alone. It's not $15 million a year is not going to get us to our goal of 45% recycling. We need about $1 billion worth of investment to get our system up to par to be able to manage all the additional materials. So we need more carts, more trucks, more recycling programs, more organics and like food waste collection, more composting facilities. it's about $1 billion investment. So $15 million, not really going to get us there. So how do we do that? One of the most exciting things about Next Cycle is it creates a place where all those industry leaders, those brands, you probably see the commercials like Dr. Pepper and Coca-Cola standing there saying, "We want your bottle back," right? You may have seen those commercials. How are they going to get the bottle back if there's no recycling system in place? If you don't have a place to put it, if you're up at your cottage somewhere or you're visiting your grandma and there's no recycling. So how do we invest in that infrastructure? So that's one of the most exciting things about Next Cycle is it provides a way to direct those corporate dollars that they want to see their sustainability goals met. They want to see recycled content in their products. But how are they going to get that? They're going to get that by investing in carts, trucks, education system, making sure that people know how, where, and why to recycle. They're going to get that by processing capacity, more robots. And so that's the first part of Next Cycle, creating a way to connect those potential funders with projects. The other part of Next Cycle is about creating strong teams and ideas and public and private groups coming together to say, how are we going to solve this? How am I going to turn this into that? And where am I going to get the money? And what's my business plan? And supporting those teams through entrepreneurship tools, meaning how do you do a pitch? How do you tell your story? How do you get a funder to want to support your big idea? And so that's sort of like the Shark Tank side of things, like making sure that those entrepreneurs are supported all the way through the system, and then they can ultimately receive some of those funding. So that's what Next Cycle is, and that's launching these months. The micro grants of $10,000 or less, which are small projects. Those the webinar is next Wednesday. So that's all happening now.
So one of the things about that I'm pretty excited about, and I know EGLE's committed to, is the diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how, you know, the money that's being made available and prioritizing hitting some of the underserved areas. I want to talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I'm so happy that we're having these conversations now. I mean, boy, 2020 was a tough year, and I think it woke so many of us and our colleagues and decision makers up to the need to make sure that whatever tools and resources we are providing, we need to do it equitably. We need to do it with diversity in mind, and we need to include people that haven't been included before. So how do we do that? We set that as our priority. So through Next Cycle, we have identified goals and targets just to make sure that we're not leaving rural out, or we're only focused or urban areas or communities of color. We need to make sure that everybody is included in this process, because if anybody is left out, we're never going to meet our goal. So it's really great that we're working on that. And I would say that there's two main priorities. So there's diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure that we're equitably distributing the funds and the technical assistance. And also, it's so nice to be able to make the connection between climate and recycling. Did you know that 55% of our climate reduction, the amount of carbon that we can reduce, comes from managing materials differently? I think most people think about climate, about how we're going to solve the climate crisis. I think they generally think about maybe wind and solar, maybe electric vehicles, but they forget about all of the climate saving greenhouse gas reductions that we get by just managing our materials differently, thinking about waste reduction, thinking about reuse, and thinking about recycling. And it's great that we're getting to the stage that people are starting to listen to that. You should check out the book Drawdown. If any of you are interested, it talks about the top things that we can all do as a society to reduce our climate impact. And the top ideas have to do with materials. So it's nice that there's been sort of an awakening to the importance of materials management and a circular economy in protecting our climate.
That's awesome. I mean, you brought up reuse, and that's really what reuse is what built our program. That's why we have the recycling program today. Is we couldn't get recycling off the ground other than, we were collecting paper and cardboard and things like that. But it's really the fact that we grew a reuse program that was able to help fund and create our center, which is awesome. And the next cycle grants and everything we've talked about earlier isn't just recycling. It's focusing on reuse. It's talking on source reduction, things like take back programs, extended producer responsibility, all those awesome things.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Chris. I think that we have to look at all different solutions, not just one. And through that, especially on recycling. So recycling is a gateway to greater environmental responsibility. It's one of those visible things that you can do. I can see, I take that bottle, put the cap back on, put it in the recycling bin. I actually saw a difference. Or I can go and look for a recycled content material. And that at that point I'm recycling, because you're not really recycling until you're buying something from recycled material. So you're thinking that. And now you're starting to think, why do I have this bottle? Why did I just do that? How do I reduce the amount of waste that I'm generating? Look at the amount of trash in my recycling bin. Did you take the recycling out? It's overflowing. Why the heck is it overflowing? Think about how you can reduce that. So you're now seeing it, because before it was in the trash, it was just something icky and gross, and we're going to do that. But now you've got your recycling there, and you're thinking, how can I reduce that? So it really is a gateway to changing our behavior, thinking about reduction, waste reduction, or reuse as well. So it's all connected.
Cool. We have a question in chat. When you were talking about climate, the book you referenced was Drawdown, correct?
Yeah, and thanks for putting that link in the chat there. Did you put that
Awesome.
in there? It looks like somebody did. Thanks, Katie, if that was you.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time watching the Q&A chat and you at the same time.
I didn't even look down there. I'm glad you reminded me of that.
So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that there's one other concept that kind of goes with this sort of connecting of the highest and best use in recycling, and that's, recycling really is a complex system. So materials management and a circular economy, it's complex. And one of the things that I notice about complex systems is it's always thought of somebody else's problem to fix, until everybody recognizes that this complex system needs everybody to do something to fix it, and then begins to work together to find those leverage points, whether it's on policy or funding or education or growing infrastructure. And through that, really connecting in with those diverse stakeholders and really having a conversation about what can be done. A lot of times we operate in our own, we almost have blinders on with our trash. Like, this is what I need to buy. I need to have a clamshell to put my salad in, and I'm going to buy that clamshell at my restaurant or foods, at my dorm. But not thinking about that has to go somewhere. What's the system that's already in place to manage that clamshell? You know what I mean? Clamshell? Is that like an industry term? I don't even know. A thing to put your salad in. Now, the person that's sitting there, I got to buy the best clamshell as possible. Thankfully, and that's going to serve the purpose. Thankfully, we are now seeing this change in mindset, thinking about, we want something that's going to reduce greenhouse gases. We want the most environmentally preferred product. We want to reduce our climate impact. We want to create a recyclable package. But then, wait a second, what if there's no system? What if there's no place for that to go? And so thinking about that entire system not only takes, forethought, but it also takes kind of bringing everybody together and saying, what can our system handle right now? How do we need to change that system so that we have composting or digester or a recycling system? And that's one of the things that I've been really impressed with MSU. MSU's got it going on. You have those conversations. You bring the right people into the room, and you know that you need to talk with Chris if you're buying a clamshell. You know that Chris needs to talk with the inner digester to see what material can go in there. And those conversations are taking place, and that's something you should be really proud of.
Cool. Yeah, we're doing a good job. We still have room for improvement. Often those questions get asked once a decision's already made. So we have two bad solutions and have to pick the best of the bad solution. Before asking the question, before we create an answer, because that's what we do, right? We usually come up with a great solution and then try to figure out the problem on the back end, the other problems it creates on the back end.
Right. That's complex systems, man. That's what you gotta do.
We try to do our best at creating those solutions. I'm gonna switch gears a little bit because I'm getting a few questions about plastics, and I want to leave plenty of time for that. That's a big topic for us. We closed our drop-off center for a month and a half due to COVID. We're still in restricted hours. For those of you who don't know, we hand sort everything that comes through into different grades. There's a 3 through 7 grade of plastic that we ship out that most people do as well. We're currently not accepting that material because there's not a lot of value to that material for us currently, and it actually is a lot of staffing to hand sort it, and we can't safely have that many people up hand sorting at the same time. We hope to bring that back in the next few months. But let's talk about there's easy plastics to recycle, which are beverage containers and things like that. We've been doing that for a while. There's a pretty good system for that. What about these mixed plastics? And when we bring it back, I think we've done a lot of homework over the past year, and we're going to be a lot more transparent about where our stuff goes. I think companies that are taking our plastic now are being more transparent about what they're actually recycling versus what their outthrows are. But you talk about complex systems, it's very hard to educate the consumer about, okay, here's 6 yogurt cups and these 2 are recyclable. These 2 are, but not locally, and these 2 are not. Where are we going with plastics, and why is it so hard to have standards? Why are all of our programs different on what we accept?
Yeah, I really like those questions. I got a chance to scan them just now, and I mean, my gosh, that's exactly what we're talking about here. Let's get the details here. Let's actually say what is recyclable, what isn't in our current system, because that might be what you're here for. You want to know what you see the right recycling raccoons. Know it before you throw it. How the heck are you supposed to know it if you don't even know if the plastic wrap from your cheese goes in there or if the caps stay on? Like, where do you get that information? So let's be real clear about that, because we probably have an audience all over the place. First person you want to talk to is where that recycling program is going. So if you're taking it to Chris, ask Chris. He's going to know what material and where it's going. If you're in a community, you're at your grandma's house and you want to know what goes there, figure out what color that recycling bin is out front, call the company, get the information, ask the hauler, as we call it, the recycling company, because the rules are different. And I'm gonna get to why the rules are different in a second, but I want to make sure that I hit home this really important point. If you are putting something in the recycling bin that you think is recyclable, or you hope it's recyclable, then you are likely doing more damage to the system than you ever intended. So it's really on you to ask the question. Now, we're going to talk about why some of that is or isn't in a second, but I want to make sure I get that point across. It's really up to you to figure that out. And then, so I kind of just threw you under the bus as somebody who's wondering what that is, what to do. Like, it's all your responsibility. No, it's not all your responsibility to solve this problem, but it is your responsibility to know at this very day what can and can't go in the bin. And it is Chris's responsibility and the local government's responsibility and the hauler's responsibility to make sure they get you those answers. So that's clear. Now, let me throw somebody else under this bus, because that is the producer of those materials. We've got a real problem in the United States, mainly, in that too many of those things that Chris was just talking about, we go and solve a problem. Hey, I'm going to get this packaging. I'm going to make it compostable, for example. but there's no system in place, or I'm going to make a multi-layer package that meets my packaging needs. You know, sell my margarita in a pouch or something like that. And but the system wasn't never designed to take that. So whose responsibility is it to fix that system? It's definitely not mine. It's definitely not Chris's. It's definitely what it's not. So it's nobody's responsibility? No, it's everybody. Let me get back to my earlier point. It's everybody's responsibility. And one of the most important things that you can do is use your voice as a consumer, buying products that are recyclable, letting those companies know that you're fed up with it, you're tired of this packaging that can't be recyclable, and get them to the table to help solve those problems. You have a really important role to play as a consumer, but it's not your problem to solve. It's really making sure that the manufacturers know that they need to care about this, and that we design the system to have that packaging recyclable. Now, one more thing. Everything is recyclable, and that's an annoying thing to say after I just contradicted myself. Is no, it's not. You can't recycle everything. That what you're probably like, what are you saying? Everything is recyclable if we invest in the system to make sure that it can make its way into a new product. If we have in markets for it, if we have a collection system that can sort it out, if we have a consumer that knows how to manage it, clean it out, get the stuff out of there, we can build markets for that. But what can't happen is if we just expect and wish that to happen. And that's the hard work that we're doing. So I really like those questions about plastics, though, because it really does. And thankfully it's getting that attention. It makes me so happy to see people or brands starting to come to the table. And I'm sure many of you have seen, I mean, the National Geographic, the Frontline, the John Oliver clips about the plastics industry. And I can tell you, it's being in this 20 years, I can see that, you know, they said things, the plastics industry and the brands said things, you know, years ago. They made promises that they didn't keep. I can tell you that people are holding them to those now, and we are getting that investment. We are getting around the table and creating something called the Plastics Pact. You should look that one up as well. And those are brands saying, hey, we're going to work on making sure that our packaging is recyclable. I think John Oliver has an important point to make. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, and you don't, and language isn't a problem for you, check out the clip. Meaning, well, you'll know what I mean when you watch it. I think he has a point there that, you know, are we the fools again to think about this, to say that that this problem is going to be solved? But I would say I wouldn't give up hope on recycling. I think it really takes us holding the brands that we buy, the materials we buy, the companies that make those accountable, and really working through the policy system to say that we all want this. We want the system to work. So there we go.
Just like your comment earlier about complex systems, plastics in themselves are a complex system, and we tend to want to oversimplify that plastics are either inherently evil or they're good. There are good I mean, from a recycling standpoint, there are good plastics and there's bad plastics, and there's plastics that are made. I was at the store last weekend and I saw a toothpaste company that I'll remain nameless, and their packaging says new recyclable toothpaste new recyclable container.
Yeah.
I am not aware of anybody locally who wants your used toothpaste container in the recycling, nor do I know any recycling plants that want them. Yeah. There are companies out there like TerraCycle who basically these folks pay to collect their stuff. But if you can imagine that, we would have boxes for Cliff Bars, toothpaste things, you know, 100 different boxes for everybody's little individual wrappers. And that, yes, their material is recyclable, but not conveniently or readily recyclable. That's a challenge.
It totally is. And I can't stand that greenwashing type of advertising or product labeling that says recyclable. Like where, how, what. I do like the how to recycle label. So you should check that one out and you'll see it. I mean, I think Target does a really good job of this. They put that on there. on most of the packaging that's the products that are sold in their store. Um, you know, the retailers using their power in the system to ensure that the packaging companies meet their sustainability goals is really changing that conversation a lot. Where if you say it's, you know, the how to recycle label says do not recycle or cannot recycle, and it's based on data. Okay, where is recycling really available for this toothpaste? So you should look for the how to recycle label and know that if it's there and it says recyclable, then likely you can recycle it in your collection program. The way they do it is they have percentages that it has to, so not every, like I said before, not every recycling program takes everything, but you look at it and it says it is, and then chances are in your system where you are, if you're, you know, you're in Michigan, most of Michigan, it will be able to be recycled. What other questions?
We're gonna
are popping in here, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna. So Rich asks, you know, how do we convince people to take the time to try to decipher the rules of recycling to recycle properly versus just taking the easy way out and throwing it away? To me, the rules of what is not recyclable are very vague, and I'm still confused even after reading them. I'm in the industry and I get confused. If you think about what we do too, we broker plastics to different mills.
Yeah.
And one mill may take something that something else doesn't. And you as a consumer, I can't keep switching our marketing materials and say, this week we take this kind of plastic, next month we don't. Yeah, it is tough, and plastic is probably out of all of our commodities is the most variable. And if, I mean, we could create an entire book on different brands of plastics and the recyclability. That's a tough nut to crack.
So I want to say something a little controversial that I partially agree with, and I'll explain what I mean by that. Why is it your problem? I mean, I just talked to you about the recycling raccoons in the note before you throw it. And this is going to be the controversial part. Shouldn't we be working toward a system that makes it completely, absolutely easy for you, so it goes in there, gets sorted out through technology? We're not there. We're definitely not anywhere close to being there, but I want to set that vision. I want to set the goal of making it, knowing that it's up to the entrepreneurs and the technology and the universities to do the research to get the technology in place so that it can be sorted out. Optical sorting, LiDAR technology, robots to pick that stuff, to get it out into separate streams, using, you know, using lasers to check to see what resin that toothpaste tube is, and air blowers to separate it out. We are moving in that direction very, very quickly. But that's not to say that today our responsibility isn't to make sure that we ask those questions about what is recyclable and look at those rules. Our system is changing dramatically so fast. And I would say, just like 30 years ago, we didn't even have barely any recycling programs, and you might have been doing paper drives. Think about how different that is to the recycling robot that's at, you know, Chris's facility right now. Just imagine what if we came that far, that fast, where are we going to be in 10, 15 years? You know, there are some serious technological advances, but that's not to say that we don't have a role right now to learn about what those materials can go in there. So I'll just say I appreciate that you're spending the time to even ask that question, because you are thinking about it in a way that I wish everybody would. So thanks for asking it.
Yeah, when we come back, we're fully intent on being even more transparent about plastic and where it goes in our system. So it's not as easy to say, you know, it's not very easy on that 3 through 7 to define everything, but we're going to do our best for customers who really want to do the work and sort and do the right thing. That goes in line with a question that we had earlier as well about, and I can't remember who asked at the moment, who it was Kim, who was asking about the materials she's been saving ever since we closed, because we were the only place taking those. I'm not sure we're going to bring some of those materials back as either.
Which ones are we talking about?
This is Kim Geiger, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't say her last name. Where's all the plastic people are putting in the bins going? Lansing single stream never accepted food packaging. So she saved bags of it.
Yeah.
We, up until, the landscape for plastic changed tremendously,
Yeah.
5 years ago now, right? Over 5 years now, about 5 years ago. We had markets for that material and people were telling us what they were doing with it. And
Okay, I got this. Wait a second. Let me
all
answer
right,
this
we'll
question.
let
I
you
got
answer
it.
it.
I got it. All right. I'm so glad I read that. Okay, first of all, that plastic film. I think that's one the sort of your bread bags, your plastic bags that you get from the grocery store, any other plastic film, as long as it's clean and dry, meaning you get the goo out of it, let it dry out, hang it up, let it dry, because moisture is a big problem in plastic film. If you bag that up, that can go in with your plastic bag collections at Meijer. Meijer is a leader in this. They came out with an announcement last November, I guess it was, that they were accepting plastic bags, including plastic film. So all of your bread bags and other plastic film can go in there. It just has to be clean. And where that is going, just because I know that was the other question, like what the heck is happening to this stuff? The retailers are bailing that up. They are brokering that through a Michigan broker, and that is going to a well-known, and I guess I just say it, Trex plastic decking company. So that brings me back to my main passion, which is growing markets for recycled materials for these plastics. It doesn't make a darn bit of sense to take a plastic bag and send it halfway across the country and turn it into a decking material if we're talking about climate. It makes a heck of a lot of sense to grow that industry in Michigan so Michigan jobs are created and we're making plastic decking here. And we're cutting down on the transportation costs and the climate costs of turning that plastic bag into something new. And so that is why we have work on our next cycle that I already mentioned and our market development grants. So really working to attract those businesses here. So that's where your plastic bag is going right now. I want to see it made into something here in Michigan.
Well, that leads us to another question from Ellen about glass recycling, where some areas are throwing it away. They don't take it at all. We take glass at MSU due to our volume, and our where we take our glass for recycling is about 4 hours away. So it's just so works out that the transportation costs offset the value of it. So we don't receive any money for the glass we collect. We absorb the cost of handling it and loading it and putting it in there, but we're not paying. People who live recycling facilities, say 4 hours north of us, have probably a lot farther to truck it, and it's a lot more of a challenge. So glass is recyclable, correct? I mean, it's a
absolutely
very recyclable commodity, but the really issue is how do we get it to market at the right cost? How do we move it?
Yeah, I was just looking at these numbers yesterday. So in Michigan, we generate about 100,000 tons of glass from our deposit law. That's the beer bottles, really. Think about what glass bottles are in there. So 100,000 tons per year. And we generate about 100,000 tons of glass containers, pickle jars, and wine bottles. It's more or less an equal amount. Now that stuff that comes out of the deposit law, I'm bringing it back to that because that's we kind of started there, right? In our conversation, that makes its way to market easy. Stuff is clean, it's sorted, it doesn't have chipped up coffee cups in it. It doesn't have paper and metal and all the little small stuff. Imagine throwing your wine bottle, let's say pickle jar, breaks easier. Take your pickle jar, you put it in the recycling bin, it breaks up. This is your curbside bin. I'm not talking about the separate drop off where Chris does a good job keeping that stuff a lot cleaner. So it gets dropped in there, it gets mixed up with somebody threw their shredded paper in there. They did their taxes, they shredded up. It's paper, a couple of bottle caps and that came off something. And I think I've got this box of toothpicks. I'll throw that in there. Wood's recyclable, right? Like, no, it's not. Don't throw toothpicks in there, please. And it all gets mixed up: wood, metal, glass, plastic, everything's like this little nasty. A recycler doesn't want that. They can't make anything out of that. It's hard to find a use for that because it's so mixed up. It's not impossible to do it though with money. Now that's where the problem comes in. Chris just said he doesn't make any money off that, so he's basically spending labor to separate something out and not recuperating those costs, getting those costs back in. Not every recycler is going to do that. So who's gonna fund that to get it separated into a valuable commodity? So the economics are upside down on glass. But bottom line is there's some really cool stuff that are being done with glass. Something called foam glass, where they take this stuff instead of using aggregate and mining a sand dune or a gravel deposit, they take that and they blow it into foam, like it's light glass, but it's still rigid, and they can use that under road beds and bridge construction. So there's a big company that might be coming to Michigan that's going to be investing in that. So that would be pretty cool. Also, glass aggregate, turning the glass containers. It's silica came from the ground. It was sand, turn it into glass, grind it up, put it in road beds. The most exciting thing is something that, in my opinion, is also going to help address the climate issue, and that's turning it into insulation. So a lot of your insulation you buy at the hardware store, that is recycled glass. They just dye pink, and you'll see some of it that looks kind of brown and grayish and green, and that's recycled glass. Putting that in your house, you're saving energy and you're doubly protecting the climate. You're using a recycled material and you're reducing your energy usage at home.
So the hope is to bring some of those manufacturers, those end users, into Michigan to help develop businesses to take that material, so we don't have to truck it so far as well, right?
Yeah, we already are. I mean, there's been a lot of good work done on that already. There was a cool project up on Mackinac Island with an overlay of glass and chip tires to get those roads. Those horses just dig up the roads more than you would believe, and so using glass. Next time you go to Mackinac Island, if you ever go, look around. You'll see glass and tires in their roads. So there already are a lot of really cool things happening.
Cool. I'm gonna try to fire through as many of the rest of them we can in the next 5 minutes. Where are we going with textile recycling?
We'll do a lightning round.
Where are we going with textile recycling? Is that a priority of next cycle at all?
Did you say textile recycling? Clothes. Yeah. Somebody's in the industry of calling it textile recycling. Where do you put your clothes? So absolutely. It's the fastest growing waste stream if we look at what people are throwing in the trash, which is kind of crazy. I mean, hear a lot about food waste, but wow, the amount of clothes we go through, our fast fashion, that's sending perfectly good clothes to the landfill. So the first thing we obviously want to think of is reuse, local reuse, reusing it in your own house, even like reforming it. Have some creative friend of yours turn that clothes you don't want anymore, turn them into something that somebody would want to wear locally. And then there's the Goodwills of the world that are selling those back in the community. And then there's the international textile markets. Those are a little more interesting and controversial. One of the most the newest textile markets really is looking at and we haven't even said this word on this call yet. How crazy is this? I'm not doing very lightning-y. I'm sorry. I will do this fast. Chemical recycling, which is taking those components and breaking them down into their original, what those textiles were made of. Polyesters, usually a lot of plastics. There's a lot of plastics in clothes, and turning them back into the original components, and then making new clothes out of them. That was as lightning as you get from me.
So can you touch a little deeper on extended producer responsibility? What are we doing in Michigan to pass more legislation to hold producers responsible for their end of life of the materials?
Not enough. Is that okay? Can we say that? So I like to talk about it in terms of a shared producer responsibility, because I think as soon as we recognize that we all have a role to play, then it makes that conversation go a little bit easier, especially with ones with a certain side of the political aisle. I would say that we have taken some interesting steps in Michigan. I think if you're going to watch that John Oliver thing, you'll notice a map where Michigan, I think, is yellow on it, that we have a law that bans plastic bag bans. We have a ban. So that just to me seems like we're starting in the wrong place. I'm not saying that a plastic bag ban is the right way to go, but I am saying that at some point we need a leverage point to get people to the table to solve those problems. And if we're going to keep local governments from bringing industry to the table, inviting them to the table to find solutions that work for everybody, then we're starting in the wrong place. I see, if we look at global trends and we see what's happening on our coasts, it's only a matter of time before Michigan has some additional shared producer responsibility legislation here in Michigan.
All right, I've got a few more questions, but I want to check in with Katie. Do we have any big ones on Facebook to answer? I have one I want to leave Matt with before we go. Do you have anything from Facebook?
I'll let you go ahead and take the last few here. We're all good on Facebook. Thanks.
Okay. Somebody asked about the School of Packaging. I'll just tell you they're a tremendous partner to us. They bring their classes through for a tour of our facility, do waste sorts. They learn about where their materials go once they make it. We're working on developing a capstone program with them. I mean, we hope to, so we have more research going into packaging. They've put out position papers on different types of materials and claims on recyclability. They're an outstanding partner.
So I know we're running low on time, but I need to say this. So when I go to conferences, or I used to go to conferences, but when I go to conferences again, it is amazing how many people in our industry are Spartans. It is absolutely like if I were to be at any, event and just yell out "Go Green," like half the room yells out "Go White" because of MSU's connection to the School of Packaging, and then sending, really thoughtful people into the world to think about that are thinking about sustainability. So I'm so appreciative of the work that Chris has done to make those connections. We have some work going on with trade organizations and MSU School of Packaging to support making sure we want to make sure that those packaging students get into a materials recovery facility, so they're actually thinking about, okay, this is what this means, this is what how an optical sorter works, and robots and that sort of thing, and what can and can't be recycled before they go out into the world and start making packaging that's not recyclable. So we're in a great position at Michigan State to do that, and so I'm really grateful for the work that they've already done.
All right, let's bring it home. Last question. What can a college student who already recycles and advocates for recycling do to help this massive issue?
I love it. I definitely want to start with use your voice as a consumer. First of all, that's the first thing you can do. Buy recycled content materials, tell the companies, write letters. As a former canvasser with Clean Water Action, I know the value of using your voice to move the political process. You would be amazed how much a simple letter to a decision maker, not a form letter, a written letter on paper, that changes its ability to change somebody's mind. So I would say the one thing you should do today is write a letter to somebody who needs to hear about these issues.
And I'll add, join the industry. There is no degree for what we do exactly. There's lots of different degrees for what we do. 30 years ago, when I was in public policy for school, I didn't think I'd end up here. I never dreamt it. There are so many different fields that can apply to all the different facets of what goes into materials management. Join the industry. We need fresh faces. We need younger people. We want to revolutionize the industry. So come play with us.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. And thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much, Matt, for joining us tonight. And thank you, Chris, for facilitating the conversation. I think you guys covered a variety of topics, and hopefully you as attendees have learned something new tonight, or a few more things than just one, and have some good takeaways. I think that the idea of writing a letter to someone who's an influencer is an excellent idea. That's one that I didn't expect to hear from you, Matt, and that was really nice. A reminder that we have another town hall coming up next month. We are focusing on conducting a home waste audit. So that will help you to, start putting into practice some of the things that we've discussed today, how you could, reduce where you can, practice that purchasing of the recycled content items, and then finding those drop-off centers for some of the unusual items. Also, as a thank you for joining us, we would like to give you a 15% off coupon for the surplus store. So I will drop that in the chat along with the event survey. And we just look forward to hopefully seeing you again at a future town hall. And just join me from home, I suppose, and thanking Matt and Chris for this great conversation tonight. And I wish everyone a lovely evening.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, I think that's it. So take care, everyone, and we will see you next time. Go green.
Go white.
Go white.